What would you do if your own family decided you didn't belong at the table anymore? Imagine working for years, sacrificing everything for the people you love, only to discover that behind the smiles, traditions, and perfect family photos, something darker has been quietly growing. In today's story, a Mother's Day dinner becomes the moment that changes everything. One quiet exclusion reveals a web of hidden judgments, emotional manipulation, and shocking betrayals that reach far deeper than anyone expected. Even the person who once promised loyalty begins to show a different side, one filled with secrets that were carefully hidden for years. But instead of arguing, instead of begging to be understood, a silent decision sets an unforgettable chain of events into motion. And when the truth finally comes out, the same family that once pushed someone away will be forced to face a reality they never saw coming. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge begins with simply walking away. Mother's Day had always meant crowded kitchens, warm laughter, and the familiar chaos of family traditions. For years, long shifts and unpredictable schedules had never stopped an effort from being made. Flowers sent ahead of time, late-night calls after work, and weekend visits squeezed into the little space left between responsibilities. Family was supposed to understand that. This year felt different from the start. Messages in the family group chat buzzed all week about brunch reservations and decorations. Photos of gift baskets appeared one after another. Yet something felt strangely distant, like a door quietly closing without explanation. Then the truth slipped out in the most casual way possible. A cousin mentioned the Mother's Day dinner, an entire evening planned at Mom's favorite restaurant. Everyone would be there. Everyone except one person. The explanation came later, through a short message that felt colder than expected. It said the job made things complicated. It said the schedule was unpredictable. It said Mother's Day should be simple this year. Simple meant leaving someone out. For a moment, it almost felt like a misunderstanding. Surely there had been a mistake, but the silence that followed made it clear there wasn't one. No one asked if the schedule could be rearranged. No one suggested celebrating another day. And the strangest part was the quiet agreement from someone who was supposed to stand closest. A husband who had always promised loyalty didn't argue, didn't defend. Instead, there was a soft shrug and a reminder not to make the situation bigger than it needed to be. That was the moment something inside shifted. Because family rejection stings differently when the person sharing the same home chooses to stay silent. The more the night replayed in memory, the clearer everything became. The careful distance from Mom over the past year, the strange private conversations that stopped whenever someone entered the room, the way the husband had started visiting Mom's house alone more often, always returning with vague explanations. It suddenly didn't feel like a simple Mother's Day dinner anymore. It felt like a quiet decision made long before the invitation was ever sent. That night, the group chat filled with smiling photos from the restaurant, glasses raised, candles glowing, a perfect family moment carefully framed for everyone to see. But something else was happening quietly at the same time, because while they celebrated together, a decision was already being made, and by the time anyone realized it, the one person they had chosen to exclude was already gone. The photos from Mother's Day kept appearing online long after the dinner ended. Perfect smiles, perfect lighting, Mom sitting proudly at the center of the table while everyone leaned closer for the camera. At first glance, it looked like the kind of warm family moment people admired from the outside. But something about those pictures felt staged, almost rehearsed. Because behind those smiles was a history no one ever talked about out loud. Family gatherings had always carried a strange tension beneath the laughter. Small comments disguised as jokes, quiet comparisons about careers, marriages, and choices. Nothing obvious enough to cause a scene, but enough to leave invisible bruises that lingered long after the holidays ended. Mom had mastered that art better than anyone. Praise was always selective, approval always conditional. And somehow, the same subtle message appeared again and again that success meant nothing if it didn't fit the version of life she believed was right. The demanding career had never truly been the issue, it was simply the easiest excuse. Because over time, another truth had quietly taken shape. Mom and the husband had grown closer. At first, it seemed harmless. Phone calls about family plans, quick visits to help with errands, occasional lunches when work schedules overlapped. It had even felt comforting to see them getting along so well. Until the small details started to change. Private conversations stopped whenever someone walked into the room. Inside jokes appeared out of nowhere. Sometimes the husband came home repeating opinions that sounded suspiciously familiar, almost word for word the same criticisms Mom used to make. Slowly, it became clear that those two voices had started blending into one. And somewhere along the way, loyalty had shifted. The Mother's Day dinners suddenly looked less like an accident and more like a carefully arranged moment, a table filled with people who had quietly agreed on one thing. Life was easier without the one person who refused to live according to their expectations. The realization settled in slowly, but once it did, everything started making sense. The cold message about keeping things simple, the husband's calm indifference, the way Mom's approval suddenly seemed far more important to him than the vows he once promised. They thought the exclusion would stay quiet, just another family moment where no one asked questions. What they didn't know was that silence had already turned into something else entirely. Because the deeper the secrets became, the clearer the truth started to look. And once the truth is finally seen, pretending not to notice is no longer an option. The night after those smiling Mother's Day photos appeared online, the house felt unusually quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes after a long day, but the heavy silence that settles in when something important has already broken. The husband sat in the living room scrolling through his phone, occasionally chuckling at messages from the same dinner that had somehow become more important than a marriage. Every laugh sounded distant, like it belonged to a stranger rather than the person who once promised to build a life together. There was no argument, no confrontation, nothing dramatic, just a long moment of watching everything clearly for the first time. Because sometimes the loudest truth reveals itself in silence. For months, maybe even years, small signs had been ignored. Late evenings explained with vague work excuses, strange emotional distance that appeared whenever Mom's name came up in conversation. The subtle way opinions had started changing, always leaning toward whatever made Mom happy. At first it seemed like ordinary family influence. Now it looked more like quiet manipulation. That realization didn't bring anger the way most people would expect. Instead, it brought clarity, the kind that makes every next step feel strangely calm. While the husband kept laughing at his phone, a suitcase was quietly pulled from the closet. Not much was taken, only the things that truly mattered. Important documents, a few personal belongings, and the kind of memories that didn't belong in a house where loyalty had clearly shifted elsewhere. Every drawer closed softly, every step careful. Because the goal wasn't revenge through noise or chaos. The goal was absence. The car left the driveway just after midnight. No note left behind, no final message sent. Nothing that could turn the moment into a dramatic scene. Just silence. Morning came faster than expected. The husband woke up first. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The kitchen light was off, the coffee machine untouched. Then the bedroom door opened and something felt wrong. Closets looked different when someone's life was no longer inside them. Calls started soon after that. Confused messages at first, then worried ones. By the afternoon, the family group chat, usually full of cheerful photos and inside jokes, had turned into a chain of questions. Even Mom sent a message asking if everything was okay. The irony of that question almost felt unreal. Because while they were busy wondering what had happened, something far more important had already begun. The silence they once used to push someone away had finally been returned, and this time, it was permanent. For 2 weeks, the silence stayed exactly the way it was meant to be, complete and unbreakable. The phone filled with missed calls and messages that shifted from confusion to frustration and eventually to desperation. The husband called the most at first, leaving rushed voicemails that sounded more annoyed than worried. At the beginning, his tone carried the same casual confidence it always had. "Call back, we need to talk," as if everything that had happened could be solved with a quick conversation. But the longer the silence stretched, the more his voice began to change. The calm certainty slowly disappeared, replaced by something far less comfortable: uncertainty. Mom's messages arrived next. At first they sounded polite, even a little concerned. Then they turned defensive, explaining that the Mother's Day dinner had simply been a misunderstanding, that no one meant any harm. But the truth had already become impossible to ignore, because leaving hadn't been the real surprise. What came next was: 3 weeks after disappearing, a thick envelope arrived at Mom's house and another one at the husband's apartment. Inside were copies of documents neither of them expected to see: bank records, property papers, legal statements. For years, while everyone believed the demanding job only created distance from family, something else had been quietly happening in the background. Long hours at work hadn't just built a career, they had built independence. The house they were living in had never legally belonged to the husband. Every payment, every mortgage document, every ownership record carried only one name. The moment the papers were read, the balance of power shifted completely. The husband's shocked phone call started again almost immediately. This time, his voice sounded nothing like before. Panic replaced arrogance. Apologies replaced indifference. He suddenly spoke about loyalty, about fixing things, about misunderstandings. Mom tried calling too, her messages now filled with regret she had never shown before. But regret only appears when the consequences finally arrive, because the last page inside the envelope carried one final document: the official notice that the house would soon be sold and that the husband had exactly 30 days to move out. The same home where he had once laughed at those Mother's Day photos, convinced that silence meant weakness. What none of them understood back then was that silence had never been surrender. It had simply been preparation. And by the time they finally realized that, everything they thought they controlled was already gone. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful family dramas, shocking betrayals, and unforgettable revenge stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with twists you won't see coming. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in this situation? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes silence tells the most powerful story of all.